This is Johnny with TigerBomb MMA, and tonight I'm going to go over UFC Fight Night Luque versus RDA and give you my thoughts on the entire 12-fight card, thoughts and predictions on the entire card itself. A couple good fights on here. The main event itself is, honestly, to me, one of the more difficult fights to kind of break down and try to predict, just because, like, with the narratives going on about with Luque and his health issues and the odds themselves, which I'll get to at the end, it's kind of goofy. Like the whole thing's kind of like it's a little weird to me. So it's going to be tough to break it down, but I'm going to give you my entire thoughts on the entire card. But before we do that, I wanted to give you my thoughts on Sandhagen versus Font. And realistically, I got destroyed by this card. I didn't get anything really properly predicted. Like I got a couple things right. Lost a good amount of money on this card. Nothing like, oh, life shattering, but it was like it just sucked. It just sucked. I'm assuming a lot of people also kind of felt this way. I checked on Twitter, and a lot of people had some bad takes and some bad bets. So it is what it is. Let me know if you actually did well or how you did on this card, because I did poorly. But first fight of the night, Asu Amabayev defeats Ode Osborne. I thought, honest to God, I really thought Ode was going to present more of a threat to Amabayev. I knew the wrestling was going to be there, but I didn't think it was going to be that easy. He made Almabayev look, in my opinion, much better than what he is. And I don't know, like this is kind of another trap in my opinion, because I do think Ode's good. And I think in his next fight, depending on who he fights, he might not be very well favored. He might be a pretty big underdog. Just my thoughts on it. That's kind of how I'm thinking. And it might be a spot where he actually wins. Like we keep getting this kind of negative perception of Ode. And I think he's better than that. It just kind of sucks to see him go that way. I'll give it to Almabayev. Like he was relentless. He did exactly what he needed to do. I was impressed overall. Not really much more to say. Like he got the submission, so props to him. Woodson defeats Bazooka. Didn't really see anything else happening. Frankly, Woodson surprised me with his actual offensive wrestling. I know his defensive wrestling was good, but his offensive wrestling and him going for subs, it's almost like he wanted to get the sub. His boxing looks good. Defensively, he is a liability because he kind of leans his head out of the way sometimes, where longer, better, rangier striker's going to clip him on the chin. And I didn't see him get caught cleanly on this fight, but it gave me a huge concern. Like I almost max bet him at one point. I'm like, you know what? I'm stupid. Let's do something stupid. But I decided, no, you know what? Like I got to stay away. And he ended up made it look real easy, which sucks. But Bazooka, I don't really have much to say about him. Like he may or may not get a UFC win, depending on who they give him. Realistically, though, with the UFC, when they get these short notice guys, they give them much harder competition. Like guys who might have like taken a short notice bout and looked good, which sucks to say because he did not. They might give him a guy like Bazooka, be like, hey, let's see how really good you are. And yeah, I don't know how long he's going to be in the UFC for, because I know he was claiming to want to be in the UFC and wanting his spot, but he's not much of a threat, to be honest. So we'll see what happens here. Ooh, Cody Durden defeats Jake Hadley. Like I'm happy for Durden, right, 100%. But I did have Hadley by inside the distance and submission round number 3. And when round number 3 came and Hadley could not get the armbar in the second round, I'm like, okay, good, get him in the third round. Hadley showed a huge issue with his, I don't want to say cardio, because I think his cardio looked good. It was more so the, what is the proper terminology? Like, I don't want to just use filler words like he looked like a bitch, but his not his fight IQ, but his willingness to win, I suppose. Like he literally almost did nothing in that third round. Like it's almost like his will to fight was evaporated. And Cody, he's a dog always. Like he showed that we'll never know how many dogs Cody Durden has inside of him until we do the autopsy after he's dead. But my guess is it's over 1.5. But the guy, ridiculous submission defense with that armbar. Like it looked pretty sunken in. You can tell how tight it was for him not to tap to that and not have his arm broken. Very impressive. So props to Cody. I'm happy that he won. It just kind of sucks that I didn't get my win. But Hadley, I thought really highly of Hadley. I am very high on him. He showed a lot of good stuff, but like even on the feet, he was getting outclassed by Cody. So it's kind of one of those like is he going to take this and learn? Because I thought he learned his lesson from the Nascimento fight. It might be another thing where he just needs to kind of evolve himself instead of just kind of expecting the submission to come, which I thought he did a lot in that Nascimento fight. He needs to kind of be a little bit more urgent. I guess there it is. He wasn't as urgent in that third round. Like, he just kind of let it go, and then he tried to take down Cody. I wasn't a fan of that. And you know what? Props to Cody, I'll say that. Damon Jackson versus Billy Q. Billy Q, I was worried about Billy Q, and I'll tell you what I did with Billy. I kept saying, even in the last video, wait to bet Billy Q live because he will be a dog. I tried to bet him as a dog. I got him at one point, he was like minus 150. So I'm like, he's looking good right now against Damon. He is kind of putting it on him in the first round. So I took that line. Immediately after, he gets taken down and the line goes to like plus 230. So I'm like, son of a bitch. And then he ends up winning. So I win the bet. Just I missed on that line. Damon showed really an evolution in himself where I think he's going to stick in the UFC a bit longer than I really anticipated. He showed good striking. His right hands were not missing against Billy Q. Oh, Billy is, I think I was right about Billy. Like, he ended up getting the win, but he made it way too close for me. And against a guy like Damon, I thought he was going to run through him like clearly from the second round and beyond. But that third round, it was a little too close for my liking, where I actually thought that they might rob Billy. But, you know, he did what he had to do. Damon Jackson, I'm looking forward to his next fight because he's shown that he is tough as fuck. So good on both these guys. But really, Billy Q, I'm kind of keeping an eye on him and maybe avoiding parlaying him and betting him in the future. Carlson Harris defeats Jeremiah Wells by submission, anaconda choke. It sucks for Jeremiah because he did everything right except in that third round where he just, I don't know what was that. Like, he should have known that the anaconda was coming. I don't know if he kind of got a little overconfident in his submission defense because he looked to be doing things pretty decent. But when you've got that choking locked in the right spot, you could be doing everything right, and then the brain just shuts off. So props to Harris, right? I thought he was going to knock out Wells, if anything. For him to submit Wells was very impressive. Wells, again, he looked impressive as well. Like, he looked like a dominant force. And to me, just got caught. Like, Harris was not ultimately impressive overall. He just kind of caught him with his own move, the anaconda. Wells, to me, though, I think he might be a guy, even despite the loss. I know he's getting up there in age, but like, I think he's going to give a lot of guys a lot of trouble with that wrestling, that EPO type wrestling where he doesn't stop. Kyler Phillips defeats Honey Barcelos. I took Barcelos like plus 180 and live as well, thinking that I thought he did pretty well in the second round. The thing with Barcelos again is like, he wasn't urgent as well. He wasn't throwing enough. He did get a couple takedowns. Maybe they weren't really counted. Phillips did what Phillips had to do, what we expected Phillips to do, but he didn't slow down. So I give props to Phillips for not slowing down. And he got a 30-27, I believe, by one of the judges. I didn't agree with the 30-27. I thought he clearly lost the third. I do think that in a different reality, and not to say that because I'm bitching about losing the money, it is what it is. Like, I personally would have still given it to Phillips, but I think in an alternate reality, in a different venue, they probably would have given it to Barcelos, possibly like a split decision. Not to say that I think he did enough, but he did give the perception of doing enough. Next bout, Ludovic Klein defeats Ignacio Bahamundes. I was very confident in Bahamundes. I had him on two real parlays. I had him with Corey Sandhagen. I almost forgot his name because of that performance. So I had him with Corey parlayed up, two leg, and I had him with Corey as well, and another competitor that will be showing up next. And he devolved in a way. Like, I know Ludovic is very good, but Ludovic's wrestling was very impressive that night. Like, the ability to just blast double his ass was incredibly impressive. And, you know, Ignacio, like, he's still a very young kid. Like, I think he'll come back, but kind of something to keep an eye on, that shorter guys might give him issues. Shorter guys that can wrestle and that can strike. He was very fast, Ludovic, that night. So, yeah, it is what it is. Like, Bahamundes just, he really couldn't get off. Like, it was just weird because, like, he had the reach advantage, he had the height advantage, but he didn't know how to use either. And Ludovic took advantage of that. So props to Klein. Like, I'm happy for the guy. Like, it sucks to lose again, but I don't know. The next one also really hurt. I actually took Alexa Kamer to win. And Tanner Boser props to him. Like, he did everything right in this fight. Like, he clinched him up. He literally like could have knocked him out had Alexa had a lesser chin. But the thing about Alexa, I truly believe, like, man, if this guy can learn from those past mistakes where people kind of clinched him up and like wrestled him, he could be successful and just be the faster striker against Tanner. And he kind of fell into that same trap. Like, I thought, all extra years, layoff, train with Stipe, he'll get you ready. And I don't know, like, Alexa just very disappointing here. Like, he just fought the same way he did like 2 years ago. And it was like, what have you been doing? Right? Like, I really expected him to look better, and he looked exactly the same. Yeah, Tanner, he was in a do or die situation, and he pulled it off. Like, he looked pretty good. Like, I'll give him that. He looked pretty good. I'm interested to see who they pair him up with in the future for Tanner, but I'll say this: he did seem to leave a lot of openings there where people will take advantage of him. People who are, not coming off of a massive layoff and have decided not to train, apparently. So moving on, Diego Lopez. That's the third guy I had on my parlay. I had him inside the distance, and then whatever money I had left over on my like Bovada account, I just poured it on him inside the distance. I think I had like 2 bets left with him. So he made it look pretty damn easy. I should have gone with my gut initially. Like, when I first saw the line, I was just going to pour everything I had into Diego Lopez. I just knew this guy's going to either knock him out in the first exchange, or whatever happens, he's going to submit the guy. And he made it look ridiculously easy. Like, the way he grabbed that triangle choke, Gavin Tucker was basically out of it. But Diego was like, you're not going anywhere. It was impressive. Very impressive. Like, for those who were kind of doubting Diego, to me, that guy was the lock of the night, and I kind of slipped up on him. I really should have max bet him, but I kind of had second thoughts. I'm like, hey, you got to be more responsible. Just because I did some stupid shit with PFL, so I'm like, yeah, be a little bit more responsible. And yeah, I was climbing back, and next bout, Dustin Jacoby defeats Kennedy. I took Kennedy as a pick, but I actually ended up betting Dustin Jacoby by knockout. I'm like, you know what? Kennedy's a very huge liability, and there's a good chance he can get knocked out early. And if it happens, it happens. But realistically, I'm like, I really do hope Kennedy wins this one. Like, I'm a big fan of Kennedy, and Dustin did exactly what I hoped he wouldn't do, which would knock him out. And first round, he did it in under half a round. The reason I know it was under half a round because I had a dumb $14,000 parlay that I bet like $25 on, where on Bovada, you have to pick, I believe, 12 legs before you can mix and match money line and props. So I'm like, I need one more, and I happen to do the over half a round. Everyone's clowning on me like, Dustin's going to knock him out in under. I'm like, he ended up doing it. Luckily, the 14 leg or the 12 leg parlay ended immediately because I had O'Day Osborne on it. So it was like no big deal. But it's just kind of funny that like everyone knew that was going to happen. And I'm like, oh, I hope to God that's not the one that cashes me out or crashes my parlay. But yeah, it sucks for Kennedy. That's my biggest issue with him. Like, he kind of leaves himself exposed a little too much. He gets hurt sometimes where he shouldn't get hurt. He's a bigger guy. He should have wrestled. Dustin, to me, his time will come up eventually. I think depending on who they give them next, we might need to evaluate if he's the fade spot. But I think Kennedy's going to win this next fight, like almost guaranteed. Like, they're not going to give him someone that can like potentially strike and knock him out that easily. So I'm looking forward to betting both these guys in the future, possibly against Dustin. Tatiana Suarez defeats Jessica Andrade. I took, with my like remaining money to kind of break even, I took Tatiana and Corey, and then I took Tatiana inside the distance. Not to say she made it look easy, but she kind of did. Like, Jessica, unfortunately, gave up takedowns way too easily. Tatiana, realistically, in my view, it kind of seemed like she struggled. Not necessarily struggled, but like she didn't make it look incredibly easy taking her down. Like, she had a little bit of resistance, but like for a minus 400 fighter, she should have been able to take her. She should have slammed her ass, essentially, is what I was expecting. So, she ended up getting the submission, which was fantastic because I keep mentioning like Patchy Mix and how Patchy dangles off of dudes. And there's a post-fight interview where she's talking about how she squeezes guys. Tatiana, that is. So it's kind of like, do they pay you to squeeze them? But yeah, good on her. And then the main event, Corey Sandhagen, he hurt his elbow, so he resorted to having a very boring fight. It kind of, to me, proved that Rob Font's very good, Just that Rob Font can get wrestled, and Corey Sandhagen is not interested in a title shot. So that's all I really have to say about that. But moving on to the actual card here, the Luque versus Dos Anjos card. Opening up the main, or not the main card, sorry, opening up the prelims is Juliana Killer Miller versus Luana Santos, the newcomer here. And Santos is minus 140, come back on Miller plus 120. Now, well, I didn't realize that Santos was 23. That's even more impressive because I did my tape watch on her, and she is a what did my notes say? A judo master judo girl is what I have. She seems pretty good for her age, 100%. Like she's got the good judo. She's fought some decent competition outside the UFC. This girl, forget her name. Yeah, Jenna Bishop. I was impressed with Jenna Bishop while watching tape against Luana Santos here. Bishop is the girl who beat the only loss on Santos's record, and she showed a lot of promise. I think she's like 5-0 now. So I'm looking forward to seeing her in the UFC. If you would have given me Bishop against Miller, I'd be like, no need to talk about this fight. Bishop's going to whip her ass. The thing about Miller, though, like she is a plus 120, and she looked pretty bad her last fight. I ended up cashing that delicious Veronica Macedo Hardy ticket at like plus 320. Delicious, I tell you. But it was more because the skill gap was ridiculous, right? Like Miller has one real path to victory. What I like about Miller is that she's very aggressive. She moves forward. She's tough. She doesn't really seem to care about getting hit. She seems to have a really good chin because when Hardy hit her with that head kick in like the third or second round, it would have knocked out a lot of people. Miller just ate it. I like her ground and pound. I like her submissions. Like overall, she can be kind of like a hurricane of wildness that can cause issues for girls if they aren't particularly like used to being pressured. And Luan, I noticed that although she's very good, and I'll get to her skill set, but I did notice that she doesn't really like to get pressured, and a lot of it can really cause her to make a lot of dumb mistakes, like shooting for takedowns where they're just from a mile away, and I didn't like that in one of her wins. But she's solid. Like she can get on top. She has the judo background. Like much less skilled girls, similar to Juliana Miller, I think she can have a lot of success over. Like getting on top, avoiding submissions, just kind of riding out the rounds. It's decent enough pop in her punches. I think she's a solid fighter, but I don't particularly like her in this spot. I really am having trouble with this one in particular because I do believe Miller can catch Santos. I do think that Miller has a really good chance of submitting her because the thing with Miller is that because she's so wild, she's not particularly technical with her strikes and her techniques that they just catch people off guard. And she is so aggressive with like the submissions and the positional on top. If she does get on top, she's going to cause a lot of trouble for Santos. And I can see Santos just essentially accepting that she's lost. Like, it is what it is. So I'm very interested potentially betting Miller. The way I kind of see it is I think Santos is more than likely to win this fight, potentially by a decision, right? Like I think she's going to have a lot of success on top. I think she's going to just be technically better than Miller in every way. I do think Miller's going to have a lot of success within those 15 minutes to the point that I think in the later rounds, she might actually be able to catch Santos. So that's why I'm so worried. If it's me, realistically, I might take a shot on Miller, just money line. I'm not just straight money line. I'm not interested in like props or anything because with Miller, I do think if she gets on top, she might just start dropping elbows and it could really ruin people's parlay. So maybe even inside the distance only. But just because I'm not greedy, I'm going to go with Miller money line. That's if I do bet this fight. But I'll go pickwise Santos decision because if she does everything correctly as I intend her to do, I expect her to do, I think she's going to just do enough and just be technically better than Miller, where Miller's just not going to, it's going to be throwing up submissions and trying to sweep and reverse because she's good off of her back. She's good at jiu-jitsu. Both these girls are solid, right? Like even Santos, like for example, I know that like she likes to get the kind of like the head and arm throw. And even in that position, like on side control, she's able to get like an Americana with her legs. Like she is solid. I don't think that's going to work with Miller though. I just worry so much that like, say she goes for one of those throws and she doesn't get it and Miller just takes her back and just has her way with her. That's why I'm so interested in this fight, even though it's the opener women's MMA bout. and I've spoken way too much about it. So I might bet Miller, but I'm sticking with Santos by decision. Let's move on. We've got Montserrat Ruiz versus Jacqueline Amorim. Plus 200 for Conejo. Ruiz come back on Jackie. Amorim is minus 240. So Amorim should win this fight by a submission. I don't like Ruiz. Like, she's another one of these girls that, like, I don't think she's uber skilled, but she's got the wrestling chops that if Amorim does slow down or gasses out like she did in her last fight where she cost me some money. Literally, I saw what she have her choke on her? I think she had a choke on Hughes, and I get up because I see how locked in it is. I go up, go outside, play with the dogs, thinking that like I cash, like I don't need to watch this. Come back, the fight's still on. I'm like, what happened? Like, what happened? Yeah, that was a rear naked choke. There you go. And I think whatever. So Amorim's very good. Hopefully she's cleared up her issues with the gas tank. If she hasn't, Montserrat's going to take over. I don't believe Montserrat's going to avoid the submission. So I'll go with Amorim by submission. I'll say round number 1. Not interested in this fight at all. Like, Jackie, to me, for me to be interested in betting Jackie in the future, other than like just the silly, like, oh, put $20 on the submission prop, why not? Is that she has to come out here and beat the absolute shit out of Ruiz. She has to like beat her on the feet, take her down at will, put her in submissions. And if Ruiz doesn't get tapped out, I want her to just beat her ass for 3 rounds and just show like I improve my cardio. That's the only way I'm interested in betting her in the future, because if she still has those cardio issues, she's going to continue to lose to fighters she shouldn't lose to, such as Montserrat Ruiz. So I'll go with Amorim submission round number 1. But again, would not be surprised at all. Would not hate on anyone for taking the Ruiz plus 200 here, because like she's okay enough to be able to grind out a decision or possibly a TKO over Amorim if she's tired. So I'll go Amorim round number 1. Next bout. Funny thing about this fight, Josh Parisian versus Martin Buday. I'm going to obviously go with Buday. Like, there's not really much to talk about it. I think Josh Parisian is one of the worst heavyweights in the roster, quite possibly the worst heavyweight. I think that Buday can win this fight in a multitude of different ways, getting on top. He's a big dude. I think he's got better cardio. Like, Josh Parisian essentially is a better striker to an extent. Like, he throws kicks and he spins and he does all this shit, but I just don't consider him to be a good athlete. I don't consider him to be a good heavyweight, like, at all. Martin Buday at least, pushes a pace. He hits hard and he can grapple. And if he gets on top of you, he's going to do some damage on you. So he's minus 200 compared to the plus 170. What I find funny about this, why I'm not going to talk about it, is that I was betting baseball today, and I was playing the overs on the hits because I essentially broke even. I think I lost $200 last night for the Corey Sandhagen fight. So I try to like put it all on baseball, which is funny because I've been doing better on baseball than I have on MMA, which I consistently tape, and shit just happens. Probably why I like the sport so much, because it's so unpredictable at times. So with baseball, I had like the Cubs versus the Braves. So I had like 5 different people to get at least one hit. Every single one of them cashed. I go back and check, and a guy named Austin Riley apparently didn't get the hit. They took it away. They considered it an error on the Cubs, thus taking away that hit officially. So I'm fucking pissed, right? And I check my Bovada account, and apparently they actually gave me the money. So I'm like, are they going to go back and check that he has 0 hits and they're going to take the money back? So I immediately, before the game ended, put it on Martin Buday. I put everything, that one ticket was like $100. It gave me back 700, and I put it all on Martin Buday, or was it 7 or 6, whatever, to win, just so they wouldn't be able to take it back. So right now I have a quote unquote bet on Martin Buday to win. Shit. I have to cash it out soon, but I just thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, I'm going to go with Martin Buday. I think I like him as a parlay piece. I don't see a way he loses to Parisian. I think his chin is good. I think potentially if Parisian comes out here trying to wrestle, it potentially might cause a bit of issues with Buday. But even in his last fight, Jake Collier to me, he's a better heavyweight than Josh, and Buday was able to just narrowly escape that. And I think with a lesser competition like Josh Parisian, I think Buday's going to really shine. I think he's going to get a finish in like late rounds, either 3 or 2. Next bout, interesting bout, very, very good fight. Francis the Fire Marshall versus Isaac the Midwest Chopper Dulgarian. Dulgarian is 5-0. He's plus 155. Come back on Marshall. He is nearly minus 200, and he's 7-1. His last fight, very interesting. Like, I picked Gomis to beat him, and Gomis did everything he had to do. He was just faster than him. Like, Francis Marshall is, he's 24. Like, he's still relatively young for the sport. I know these guys are coming up. I think he's a black belt even. And even then, like, he's still relatively young and inexperienced for MMA, where, some guys are just going to be able to outsmart you and outpoint you. And I think that's what kind of happened with Francis Marshall. And in that third round, like, I was very impressed by Marshall. Like, I think he's a very solid kid. He's good on the feet. He's good with his wrestling, really good jiu-jitsu. Kurt Pellegrino trained the guy. And Kurt's a really good, black belt in jiu-jitsu, Batman Pellegrino. I just have my doubts about Francis Marshall when it comes to what is it? Not necessarily the output. I think his output's good, but when it comes to winning fights via point fighting, like, you can kind of see that when Gomis was point fighting him and just doing enough to beat him, like, he didn't know how to react. He should have pushed a harder pace. He should have tried to wrestle him more. And I guess he just tried way too much to try to strike with the guy. So that's my biggest criticism about Francis Marshall. Is just, like, I think he just needs a little bit more cage time and a little bit more experience in those types of fights where, like, the fight is escaping him. He needs to do more. What he did in the third round was excellent, where he nearly submitted the guy. And that's what he needed to do in the second round. So I think he's going to come out here looking better. The issue is that he's fighting Isaac Dulgarian, who, to me, this guy's an absolute powerhouse. He is 5-0 for a reason. He's been finishing a lot of guys. I think every single guy. I don't think he's ever gone outside the first round. Powerhouse of a wrestler, dynamite in his hands, really good at transitioning when he's on top of guys. Like, he gets the mount on almost, I don't want to say every single guy, but a majority of the guys he fights, he gets the mount on. Like, he is 5'7". The guy is very good. I just worry so much about his cardio. Like, he's never been outside the first round. So it's one of those, like, this is a problem because we haven't seen it, but it may not even be a problem at all because we've never seen it be a problem. So we're not sure. I do like Dulgarian in this spot quite a bit because, like, to me, it's one of these, like, ripping the Band-Aids off type of fights. If Dulgarian comes in here and does exactly what he's been doing, just running through dudes, getting takedowns on them, taking the back, pounding dudes out, the guy hits really hard. I think we might see Francis Marshall get finished here. It's a very good possibility. But if he doesn't get it, you've already considered it a loss. You don't have to wait to the judges' scorecards where you're like, oh my God, did I win? Is it going to be a robbery in my favor? Like, he's probably going to get his ass beat if it is true that his gas tank sucks. So I like these kind of spots where it's like, hey man, I'm going to lose this fight, so why even bother? So I might put maybe half a unit, maybe a quarter unit on Isaac Dulgarian. I think he can get the job done. Like, if he comes out here and surprises me, and he comes out here and just relentlessly wrestles Francis Marshall, just beats the shit out of him for 3 rounds, I'm like, well, there we go. Like, it's still a winning bet. So I'll pick Dulgarian. I'll say he actually gets I don't want to say submission because I do respect Francis Marshall's ability as a jiu-jitsu specialist as well. But I do think that because Dulgarian hits fucking hard, I think he can actually pound him out in the first or the second round. I'll go first round just to kind of keep the trend. But again, I'm very aware of what kind of fight this is, that if Dulgarian doesn't get a finish, there's a really high likelihood that he's going to be completely gassed and get finished himself. So I'd rather take the plus 155 money on the underdog in Isaac Dulgarian. Just kind of like, let's test the kid out. Maybe he is exactly what we see. The fact that he's been running through guys, to me, it isn't like oh, well, he's got no gas or whatever. It's just that, like, he's been given the opponent and he's just been unfortunately knocking them out early. He's like, I'm sorry, I keep knocking these toys out. Like, you keep giving me broken toys. It is what it is, So I'll go with Isaac Dulgarian by a first round TKO. Next bout, okay, Terrence McKinney is fighting Mike Breeden here. I like Mike. I like his boxing. I think he's a fun fighter. Unfortunately, he's fighting Terrence McKinney, who is going to get a submission in the first round, right? Like, I don't think Mike is going to be able to knock him out. If he does knock out McKinney, Oh boy, that would suck for McKinney. But the under is clearly the best possible option here, depending on what the line's going to be. But yeah, Terrence McKinney's minus 260. Comeback on Mike Breeden is +1, or I'm sorry, plus 210. So McKinney round number one, McKinney round number one submission, McKinney round number one inside the distance. Whatever. He will get this finish, in my opinion. I don't see McKinney having any resistance from Mike Breeden, right? Like Mike Breeden, again, like I like Mike. He's money Mike Breeden. Fun fighter. It's just unfortunately, like, I don't think he's UFC caliber. Maybe a few years ago, he could have been UFC caliber, like having wins in the UFC. But at this point, like the new breed of lightweights are just too damn much for this guy. And he's 34 years old. So yeah, Terrence is going to unfortunately run through him. So I'll go with McKinney round number one submission. This damn fight. Interesting fight. We've got the maniac Marcus McGhee versus Young Savage JP Buys. JP Buys being plus 300 is understandable, but to me, it's kind of like this is 135 JP Buys. JP Buys at 135 has like a ridiculously mythical chin where, like, what the hell was his name? Montel Jackson couldn't knock him out. I'm like, what? You're telling me JP Buys didn't explode when Jackson hit him hard? Like, must be the extra 10 pounds. Marcus McGhee minus 400 to me is like steep, like really, really steep. Like, I know how good he looked in his fight against Journey Newsom, especially on short notice. And I'll tell you this, not only was I impressed by Marcus McGhee, like he showed to me in that fight, like this guy is UFC caliber ready. Whether that means he's going to be making a run, which I'm not saying that, but he was just ready to be in the UFC with the style, with the like preparation. Like he just had it all, in my opinion. He had the pace, he had the cardio, he had the ability to strike. He was super comfortable on the feet, and the fact that his takedown defense was on point. Like he's 33 years old. To me, he looked like a complete package. Like, damn, this guy fights. This guy's good. Like he's from the MMA lab, so you definitely see that he's getting a lot of training and he's picking up things very well, which is crazy. Like you see guys that train at specific gyms, and you're like, they've got X champion here, and they've got this world grappling champion here, and this world wrestling champion here, and they don't look anything like what their team should represent. And to me, Marcus McGhee shows me that like this guy is picking things up at MMA lab, that like he's picking them up, and he's super unassuming. But unfortunately now he's super assuming because he's minus 400. So automatically, like McGhee inside the distance might be a good spot. And the reason I do like McGhee inside the distance is because although JP buys, I respect JP. I feel bad for JP. Didn't deserve what happened to him. Like he's a very good wrestler. He's a very good submission grappler as well. He's been training with some good people as of late, like training with Aljamain and some other fucking assholes. But JP at plus 300, I think he can have a good spot here where he could win potentially a decision against Marcus McGhee by just out wrestling him. What I worry about, why I think the minus 400 in this spot really sucks if you're just wanting to like not take any props or just say like Marcus McGhee's a parlay piece. The reason I hate that minus 400 is that if JP buys has success in the first round, that number is going to significantly drop. And I do think JP is going to have some success. How I see this fight happening is that, like, worst case scenario, absolute worst case, and you've got McGhee and you're on his side, JP buys just completely not ragdolls McGhee, but he does enough to like win a 29-28 by just out wrestling him in the first, surviving in the second, and out wrestling him in the third, which would suck, especially at that number. Now, what I expect to happen though is that at bare minimum, JP wins the first round. The line drops significantly enough for me to be like, okay, that's a good enough line to potentially live bet Marcus McGhee. And at that point, Marcus is going to have a much more tired JP buys, because the kicks that Marcus throws to the body, like he throws to the teeps to the body, he just works the body very well in that. Just even watching the Journey Newsom fight was like impressive. I'm like, damn, this guy, I forgot the joke about him. I said Marcus McGhee looks like the monster from Ernest Scared Stupid, but the guy can fight. But yeah, the body work that he had was very good. Once JP Buy slows down, I think McGhee's probably going to crack him, not knock him out, because it is kind of harder to knock out JP Buys at bantamweight. But I think at that point he's going to be able to snatch up a submission. So I'll go with the maniac here, like later. I think he can get a submission on him in the later rounds, like round number 2 or round number 3. That is if he just doesn't come in here and look minus 400 and just blast JP Buys into, like, I guess, back to South Africa or whatever, where they might. No, never mind. He's a white South African. They don't take kindly to them out there. But yeah, I'll go with Marcus McGhee. I just don't like that line. I do see a possibility that JP can win this fight, despite the fact that Marcus McGhee's takedown defense and ability to get back up was very impressive against Journey Newsom. JP's a different type of wrestler. He's just more relentless. Like, I might even take a little bit of shot on JP just because, like, solidarity to the cucks out there. So I'll go with Marcus McGhee. I'm going to say second round submission. If he starts putting it onto that body, JP Buys will slow down, like, guaranteed. Like, it's going to happen. So I'll go with McGhee by second round sub. Next bout, Josh Fremd versus Jamie Pickett. Funny enough, another fight that I think is going to be a bit closer than what the odds indicate. We've got Josh Fremd minus 310. Come back on Jamie Pickett is plus 250. Like, I like Fremd. I like his style. But him beating Tadikris Dumas, who wasn't quite ready for the UFC, doesn't mean that he should be minus 310 to me. Like, Jamie Pickett finds ways to win. And to me, Josh Fremd is not a guy that should be that high of a favorite, even against Jamie Pickett. Like, the fact that Jamie survived against Bo Nickel for as long as he did, he should not be plus 250 in my opinion. Like, I know Jamie Pickett's kind of a bare minimum guy, but he's a big dude. And to me, Fremd is just like, I like Fremd, right? I want to pick him. I wish he wins. I hope he wins. I'm going to pick him to win. I'm going to go by decision. But I just feel as if the minus 310 is kind of like, what are we watching here? Like, is Josh Fremd really that dominant? Like, he was even having a bit of trouble with Tadikris until he wasn't. You know what I mean? So a guy much more skilled than Tadikris and Jamie Pickett, the Nightwolf, I think he can give him issues, right? The fact that he's still in the UFC, he's going to be motivated not to lose. So that alone gives me a lot of concern. Like, Josh Fremd is a guy that kind of makes fights a little too close, in my opinion, sometimes. And I think Jamie Pickett could probably draw him out into a closer round where if it goes to the scorecards and you've got a ticket with Fremd on it on your parlays, and for whatever reason you put him on all your parlays, you're going to be pretty butthurt when Jamie Pickett wins this one by split decision. So I'm going to go with Fremd by decision. I think he is technically the better fighter, but sometimes the better fighter doesn't win. Like, if Jamie Pickett can slow down the fight, maybe get takedowns of his own, get on top, use his frame, just land enough and just enough hard strikes to, like, maybe mark up Fremd, I think he can lose this fight. Fremd, that is. I'm going to pick him to win by decision. I'm just not a fan of picking Fremd just because he beat Tadikris Dumas. How is he minus 310? Like, ridiculous. Again, another spot for Jamie Pickett here that he could potentially win a fight, like, in staying in the UFC. So I'll have nothing to do with this fight, even though, well, it's the main card opener. Yeah, so I'll stay away. Next bout. This fight right here, I had a bit of trouble with because it's another one of these fights where, like, the odds are accurate. I do think the odds are spot on for Tafon Nchukwi to be minus 150. I think they're spot on 100%. And AJ Dobson is plus 120. Like, AJ is coming off of a surgery, like a knee injury. So I think that AJ Dobson has the goods. I think he's got the wrestling. I think he's a powerful young man at he's 31 years old. He's 6'1" at 185. I just think that he underperforms a lot. And I think he doesn't really show how good he is sometimes. Like, you just see sometimes, like, this guy's got some skill. Like, even when he lets his hands go, I'm like, okay, he's got something there. It's just his last fight and his last few fights, he's just been very underwhelming. And now that he's coming back off of a knee surgery, I don't know if I trust the guy. I do think he is a live dog here because Tafon Nchukwi, like, the guy is super solid. He's moving back down to middleweight. And even though he's had, like, mixed results at middleweight, in my opinion, I think he's a little bit better at light heavyweight. I just worry about the weight cut kind of draining him. Like, his body might have gotten used to being at 205, and him to drop down, like, 20 pounds might be problematic because he's been getting knocked out at light heavyweight. And I think Dobson has a good chance to knock him out. Like, I worry that Tafon, being the much more technical striker and kickboxer, is just going to outpoint him in the first few rounds. And then I worry that AJ's just going to let it go finally, and he's going to crack him. And that might be what causes AJ to kind of get out of his funk, right? Like, I do think that AJ Dobson is a knockout away from having a good run in the UFC once he like kind of like snaps out of it. Like, hey, I'm having success just kind of like letting my hands go. I'm knocking dudes out. And I think he's got a good chance here to knock out Tafon Nchukwi. But in reality, though, I got to go with Tafon as a pure pick by decision. I do think that both these guys are very solid. I think this is a great matchup. It's just that because Tafon throws more, he's very consistent. Like, he's very good at kickboxing. Like Lloyd Irving, he trained him well. It's just that that chin is a huge liability. Like, he got knocked out by Mirzakhanov, and I'll tell you, like Mirzakhanov, that fight, he looked fantastic, stuffing takedowns, just outpointing him, like throwing a ton of volume at him. And then he got cracked with that flying knee. I'm like, and I don't blame him for getting knocked out on that one, but I do blame him a bit for getting knocked out by Oberg by that like little soft punch that landed on him. Like, it was a very fast punch. It just, to me, was like, oh crap, is his chin done? Maybe. And I know AJ, when he throws his punches and he finally lets them go, he throws them hard. I worry that he might not be able to effectively land on Nchukwi if he just doesn't, if he's not mentally there. Like, I don't know how his rehab is going. He looks to be in great shape. I just do worry about betting AJ Dobson. I've got a really poor track record because I've bet him on both fights in the UFC, and he's really let me down in both. Like, the first fight I can understand against Malkoon, like, shit, Malkoon's going to do that to you if you're not ready. He had a really good takedown defense early, but he didn't do enough. And then that Petrosian fight, I was like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? Throw more. Like, you're doing well. Like, it was very close where had he done a bit more, he would have won that fight. He just didn't pull the trigger, and I worry about that every time I look at the line. I'm like, plus 120 against the guy he can potentially knock out eventually, especially like if he's getting yelled at by Mark Coleman, like, God, fucking no, well, whatever. And then he lets it go and he knocks him out in the third. Like, it's going to be a good line. So I might keep an eye on Dobson live to see how he's doing, because if he doesn't knock him out early, I think Tafon's going to have a lot of success. And if I see any glimpses of maybe AJ Dobson coming close to cracking Tafon, like say if it gets to the third round and AJ's like, I don't know, like he's lost both rounds, but he's looked potentially like, oh, he's going to knock him out by a plus 320 or something, I might take a shot on AJ at that point, just because like if he's like do or die, I think he can muster up a knockout here. So I'm going to go with Tafon Nchukwi. I think he is smart enough to avoid getting hit. I think he might be able to get his own takedowns as well. It's going to be an interesting fight. I do like this one quite a bit. It's two explosive people. Melanated folk. I like seeing these guys fight. Hopefully USA wins, though. So I'll go with Tafon by a decision. All right. Polyana Viana versus Yasmin Lucindo at strawweight. Another interesting fight. Like, when I saw this initially, I was like, is this a fade spot for Lucindo? Because she's nearly minus 200, minus 190, 21 years old, 5'3", 66-inch reach. She's shown to have, like I mentioned earlier with Dobson, she has the goods, but I think she's just a little immature in the sense that I don't think she knows how to. She doesn't know how to use her weapons, right? Let's just put it to you that way. I think she's got good striking. I think she's got power in her punches. I think she's got good wrestling. I think her jiu-jitsu is solid. I think she's still a purple belt or possibly even a brown belt. Like, she seems to have everything, but she doesn't mix it up well enough to be dominant. Where it's like against Brogan Walker, she should have ran through Brogan Walker in a way that it's like, damn, this girl's like the next Brazilian female Khabib at strawweight. Very specific brand. But she made it seem like, she did the bare minimum and she got the decision. When I was watching that fight, I was like, she's not, it almost seems like she doesn't know how good she is. And there's going to be spots where if she continues to fight that way, women like Polyana Viana might be able to capitalize, because Polyana, although I think that she isn't, all that great herself, to be honest, like she has the UFC experience. She knows how to win fights in the UFC. She has power in her punches. She's got good striking. Her jiu-jitsu's gotten better, which she could get a opportunistic submission. But I do think that she plays off of her back too much. So if Lucindo, say, were to use her wrestling and her top control, I think she can win this fight 100%. I'm going to pick her to win. Like, I think she can win this one by a decision for sure. I just worry that if there are moments in the fight where she's not doing enough, where she's like, well, I'm on top. What do I do here? Do I go for a submission or do I go for ground and pound? Like, she should be looking to potentially just get better position to land strikes. Like, I just think Polyana might just have the wherewithal and the jujitsu off of her back to maybe regard, attempt some submissions, and make Lucindo a little bit uncomfortable, even though I know how good Lucindo can be at passing and maybe doing damage. And if it becomes a striking battle after like maybe a few minutes on the ground, it could be 50-50. Like, I don't think Polyana's going to get knocked out cold by Lucindo, but if it does happen, it's going to make her look better, and there might be a future fade spot on her going on. It's just, it gives me so many like problematic vibes here. Like, I don't like the line. It should be closer. I think I would probably feel comfortable taking Lucindo at like -130. At -190, that's a completely different number. I'll take her to win this one by decision. And realistically, Polyana, I don't like the number at the +160 to take her and to feel confident in her. Like, if she was +200, I'd be like, yeah, fuck it. Like, I'll lose my money at +200, no problem. It's just a tricky fight. Like, these two Brazilian girls are going to go at it. Just because one's younger, less mileage, of course, even though they have equally the same amount of fights. It's just that less mileage and less IQ, I guess, less experience. And I think the experience of Polyana could pose some issues here. I'm going to root for Lucindo. I'll take Lucindo, but I might take a shot on Viana. Moving on. Poor Chris Daukaus here. Is this the co-main? No, that's a highlight fight or whatever. Khalil Rountree versus Chris Daukaus. Rountree -205. Come back on Daukaus is +170. Well, Daukaus is moving down to light heavyweight. I've seen pictures of him. He still looks a little flabby, but definitely in much better shape. I fear for his life in this fight. What did I write about him? Let's see here. Yes. The good thing about Chris Daukaus is that people don't seem to highlight. Like, we keep talking about he keeps getting knocked out. Like, yeah, Chris Daukaus, he's just kind of a bum at these points. Like, kind of a laughing matter. What people don't seem to realize about Chris Daukaus, right? Like, yes, he was a former police officer, and yes, the moment that he quit the force where he was getting a steady paycheck, he ended up getting knocked out, and then he got knocked out 3 times in a row. What people don't realize and fail to realize is that Chris Daukaus is a saint. He is doing much more for race relations in this country than anyone else. Chris Daukaus is so anti-racist that he purposely allows himself to get knocked out and dominated by black fighters each and every time. And I commend him for that. I commend him for that because he's doing exactly as a white man should, and getting extinct by the African-American fighters. And in this particular case, we've got another one fighting Chris Daukaus, except that according to Sean Strickland, Khalil Rountree is a bit of a pussy. Doesn't fight like a pussy, though. He tries to murder people in there. This is quite possibly the worst debut fight for Chris Daukaus at 205 because, like, joking enough, yes, he's fighting another black dude. It's just that he's fighting a guy that, like, he's such a soft-spoken guy outside the cage, and, Sean makes fun of him for being a pussy and whatnot, but inside the cage, he is looking to murder you. Like, I've never seen a guy throw a kick to the body at a grounded opponent as hard as Khalil Rountree is thrown. And I'm like, dear God, like, he's broken dudes' kneecaps in the cage. Like, this guy's going to come out here and try to kill Chris. And that's my biggest issue with Daukaus is that, like, his boxing offensively, very good. Defensively, it's kind of poor. Like, he's used to being the faster guy at heavyweight. Now he's going to be the less faster guy. And I feel like this is going to be a very similar fight to how Bozer made his UFC debut against Cutelaba, and Cutelaba just said, fuck you, and just pounced on him and finished him. And I just feel bad for Chris in this spot. Like, he should have not taken this one. He should have gotten a much easier fight, in my opinion. He could have fought like Zach Paunga, get his confidence up, see how the punches feel. And if he gets wobbled, like, make a decision at that point if you want to continue to fight at this weight class or how you want to fight. And why I say that is, like, I think Chris is going to have to use his jiu-jitsu black belt. He's going to have to wrestle. He's going to have to tire out Khalil. Like, Khalil, to me, he's a dangerous fighter, but he's not like this, oh my God, he's going to just run through a division. Like, he's very beatable. You can knock out Christakis could knock out Khalil Rountree. I just see, like, I just don't see it really happening, especially if Rountree just goes in and just starts throwing. I think the punches landed are really going to hurt Chris. If Chris is on the outside kind of bouncing, the leg kicks are going to hurt Chris. So Chris is going to have to wrestle. I don't particularly see him having a whole ton of success with the wrestling. If he does, and props to him, I am rooting for the guy. I don't want him to continuously take damage. And frankly, I think Khalil owes me a win after that Dustin Jacoby debacle. So I am kind of rooting for Christakis, but realistically, like, the more realistic outcome is going to be Khalil Rountree by knockout. And also, I don't really want to shit on his physique because my physique ain't that great. But Christakis doesn't look incredibly, like, impressive at light heavyweight. Like, he doesn't look like he's got the abs quite yet. If he shows up on the scales, like, looking lean and cut, has the Black Beast type abs, and I might reconsider. I might root harder, and I'll cross both my fingers for Christakis instead of just the one set. But yeah, I think Rountree is going to go in there and disrespect Chris. And as long as he goes in there and does exactly what he should and doesn't, like, go out there just fully reckless, like, pounce on him, but pounce on him calculated, I think he's going to get him out of there. Because, like, Chris could still knock him out. Chris has crisp boxing. It's just that his defense has always been the issue for me. So I'll go with Khalil Rountree by a first-round knockout, but I am really hoping I'm wrong on this one. Like, it's one of those, like, I want to go with my heart and my gut. They kind of, like, cross sometimes. My gut is like Rountree. My brain is Rountree, but my heart is like, Christakis, do it for me, Christakis. Please do it for me. He ain't going to do it, though. So I'll go with Khalil Rountree by a first-round knockout. All right, co-main event, we've got Cub Swanson versus Hakeem Dawodu. Hakeem is minus 250. Comeback on Cub Swanson is plus 200. So what I found interesting about this fight for Cub Swanson is that it's essentially the same fight that he had his last time out against Jonathan Martinez. And the way I broke that one down is that, like, it's Cub Swanson versus a guy who is very technical, very good kickboxer, very solid, with a possibly really shitty chin. Hakeem is that guy to a T. His chin is kind of shitty, but he's so technical. He's very clean. He rarely makes mistakes. And it's oh God, like, I really want Cub to win. I really want him to win because he's 40 years old, essentially. He's been fighting. He's been putting on great fights for a long time. I think he deserves a win. I think he's still skilled. He still has it. It's just that, like, he's fighting guys that are just faster than him. And just at this point, 2023 Cub Swanson can't fully hang with these guys. 2023 Cub Swanson can knock out a lot of guys. The guy's got some really slick hands. Very good fighter. It's just that, like, he's fighting a very technical guy, and Hakeem Dawodu rarely gets clipped hard these days. Not to say that Cub can't catch him. I do think he can hurt Hakeem and finish him with strikes, like 100%. Hakeem Dawodu, again, I think he should win this one by a decision. He doesn't seem to have a whole ton of pop in his punches himself. He's a very good, like, safe decision machine kind of guy because he's so technical. He throws a lot of good volume. He moves forward very well. He's got good stuffing of takedowns. He's solid. It's just that, yeah, that chin is always going to be a liability for him, at least in my opinion. The good thing about him, though, is that because he's so technical with his, like, striking and guarding himself and blocking stuff, doesn't really get hit super duper clean where it's going to wobble him. But because of Swanson's, like, good movement and his flowing ability to throw combinations, I think maybe there's a good chance that, like, the second or third punch is going to crack Dawodu and potentially wobble him. So, like, I am really hoping that Cub wins and just retires on a massive knockout, and then Hakeem is just like, but realistically, I think Dawodu wins this one by a decision. I think he's just going to outpoint him. He's going to use leg kicks. We saw what happened with leg kicks and Cup Swanson in his last fight. Not that they're equal, because Martinez is. I rather take like 10 Hakeem Dawodu leg kicks, because they're just going to be like slappers, compared to one Jonathan Martinez leg kick. But they're still leg kicks, and I think the points racked up by Dawodu are just going to coast him to a decision. And then we've got the main event here: Vicente Luque versus Rafael Dos Anjos. To me, realistically, the real BMF, if we're talking about BMFs here, and Dos Anjos, like, he's fighting Vicente Luque. That's some shit right there at 170. Like, Vicente Luque, if this was like 3 years ago, they were like, oh my God, Rafael Dos Anjos has lost his mind. Like, we got to make sure he's filled out his will. We don't want his kids to like grow up with nothing. Like, maybe some scam artist convinced Rafael to take this fight. Is he dying? Is he short on cash? Do we need to help Rafael Dos Anjos? Like, what's going on? Like, did he lose his money in crypto? Why is he taking this fight with Vicente Luque? It's just that Dos Anjos will fight anybody, like, legit. It's very impressive, the fact that like he keeps going up and down, 155, 170. Guy is incredibly impressive, and again, he'll fight anyone, anytime, anywhere. And it would be really nice if he drops down and he fights Justin Gaethje for that belt and he retires with that BMF belt, because I do believe, as much as like I've had my issues with Dos Anjos in the past, I think that would be like the perfect feather in his cap. Like, this guy fought like the original BMF, which would be Cowboy, and he beat him twice. Even though I think Cowboy submitted him twice in like a grappling thing, whatever. Still though, like, Dos Anjos to me is like, damn, they're almost 40 years old and he's still going at it, and especially fighting at a higher weight class against killers. And with Vicente Luque, like, the fact that like Dos Anjos is minus 130. Vicente Luque is plus 110. That's ridiculous. That's crazy. Then you realize the guy's apparently been having brain bleed. That's not good. And the fact that, Vicente Luque is kind of, at these days, realistically, if I'm being honest, as much as I love Vicente Luque, like, I used to joke around, like, I am Luke gay for Luque. The guy, his takedown defense has seemingly regressed in my eyes, and he's gotten a little bit slower. Even though he's 31 years old, he's taken a ton of punishment, right? Dos Anjos at least has the like grappling background himself to kind of fall on, because he's not like a spring chicken himself. Obviously, he's been cracked a ton of times. I think Luque has a really good shot here to knock him out. My issue here is that if Luque comes out here and he's still having negative effects of, like, essentially what is the Jeff Neal fight, where Jeff Neal took years off of his life in that fight, it would be a sad day to see if like Luque gets hit once and he goes down, right? Like, if Dos Anjos, say, takes him down and maybe even struggles to take him down and eventually just grinds him out and wins a really close fight, like, I'd have no problem with that, like, personally, like, either losing on either side. It's just that, like, I do not want to see Luque get hit and then like wobbled or look like a shell of his former self. Like, I am concerned for his health, but he seems to be cleared. I think things are well, but like, going back and watching his fights, I'm like, the guy is an absolute stud. It's just like, I think he needs to really adjust his fighting style. Like, as much as I love to see him fight, like, he goes out there and he puts it on the line every single time. He's kind of like one of these guys that, like, he's so used to being able to take a punch and then land his, which is like 3 or 4 times harder and cleaner. Like, his counter striking is great, right? Like, even watching him against Jeff Neal, who was much faster than him with the striking, like, he was countering effectively, but Jeff Neal's got one of the most ridiculous chins at this very point. It's just, yeah, it's concerning to me betting this fight or even like breaking it down, because like, if you're using your brain and you're looking at the stats and everything, like, Rafael Dos Anjos should be able to take him down, have his way with him, eventually, wind him down, break him down, possibly get a submission, right? Or at very least a decision, just kind of out wrestling him. It's not really that simple in my eyes, because I think Luque, he's going to have to focus here, obviously, at defending takedowns. I don't really think Dos Anjos is going to have a huge amount of threat on the feet, because he's not going to have the reach advantage. He's going to be at a 7-inch reach disadvantage. He's going to be the smaller guy against Vicente Luque. I think Luque is very strong. I think his counters are good, and I think that if Dos Anjos does try to strike with him enough to try to close the distance. Like, even if Rafael throws like a jab, I think Luque could just counter left hook him and hurt Dos Anjos. Like, Dos Anjos has been rocked a lot of times. He's been finished. I think his chin is clearly, at this point, it's still very good, but Luque is Luque, and Luque hits ridiculously hard. And I just don't know what the outcome is going to be, to be honest with you. Like, I'm very interested in this fight as a fan of both of these guys because it is very close. Realistically, though, the way I see it, Luque should be a much bigger favorite. I think at this point, Luque should be at least minus 150, assuming that like he's fighting a smaller guy. Unfortunately, that smaller guy happens to be Rafael Dos Anjos, who's one of the more well-rounded fighters of all time. Like, he is the better fighter overall compared to Luque. It's just that he's not, again, the spring chicken himself. He's fighting a guy who hits ridiculously hard, and although he can exploit the grappling, I think Luque is strong enough to be able to stuff a lot of those takedowns. Like, Dos Anjos wasn't necessarily able to just easily take down Bryan Barberena. Like, Bryan was able to like claw back up. He eventually succumbed to it because of how good Dos Anjos is, because Dos Anjos was kind of shilling out for those takedowns. Like, I think he kind of like swept the leg out from him and got him down. But then again, it is Bryan Barberena. And against Fiziev, like, he wasn't able to take him down easily as well. And Fiziev is like he's a fucking fantastic just striker himself. He doesn't really have much of a ground game. So I have to go against like better judgment, essentially. Like, realistically, I do think Luque has a good shot to win. It's just like I do worry about that whole narrative of like he's gotten hurt, and I'm just keep thinking like if the Jeff Neal fight didn't happen, it was just the Bilal fight. Like, let's just go back two fights ago for both of these guys. Fiziev just knocked out Dos Anjos, right, at lightweight. And Dos Anjos is moving up to fight a guy who just got out grappled by Bilal Muhammad. How would you put that fight? Yes, Dos Anjos can go for takedowns, but he didn't seem to have the takedown ability against Fiziev, a much smaller, stockier fighter. And although Luque did get taken down by Bilal Muhammad is essentially a true welterweight, and he's fighting now Rafael Dos Anjos, who is a smaller man from a smaller division. Minus 200 Luque is what I would guess. But now that Luque got his bell rung and that Dos Anjos submitted Bryan Barberena, it kind of inverts that a bit. So I think I might take advantage of the line, like kind of like a ride or die type of situation with Vicente Luque. I do think he can clip Dos Anjos. Like, I was so impressed still with Luque in the second round with Neal, where he was like kind of clawing back. Like, he kept getting rocked, but again, he was getting rocked by a much motherfucker's name is Hands of Steel, but he is like incredibly fast, and I think a lesser fighter would have eventually succumbed to Luque's pressure and his punching power. So I'm going to go with Luque on this one. I'm going to go with second round TKO. Like, it could come and bite me in the ass, but I think I am going to take a shot on Luque, and I'm going to actually record it. I haven't been recording my bets as of late because I've been so like absent-minded. But yeah, it hasn't been good. I'll tell you that right now. It has not been very good. Thank God for baseball, because I'm clawing back. But I'm going to go with Vicente Luque on this one. I do think that in an exchange where Rafael tries to go for a takedown, I think Luque's going to be able to stuff it. They're going to go out center of the octagon. Luque's going to move forward. Maybe another stuff from Luque. He's going to continue to walk him forward, jab him up, kind of not hurt Rafael, but like kind of knock his head back a bit. And I do see, I don't know why I keep thinking counter left hook from Luque is going to what's going to be the thing that does Rafael down, or knocks him down, that is, where Luque is going to finish him up with strikes. It's just a different type of power that you forget. Like, Luque's so good with the hands. And I don't want to think of the fact that Luque does have a good anaconda choke. I just don't think he's going to get it on Dos Anjos. I do think he's going to clip him at one point. And if he doesn't clip him, Dos Anjos is going to just do what he does and, be the better fighter in this situation. But yeah, it's a great fight. It's a really great fight. I guess, Dos Anjos is a legend for sure. I don't want to call Luque a legend. I guess he's a legend in my eyes, but he's not quite had the resume or like the notoriety quite yet. But like, it's a absolutely great fight. I'm really looking forward to this one. But yeah, those are my predictions for Luque versus Dos Anjos. Let me know what you think in the comments. I am really interested in what people think about this main event because, like, I haven't been this duped with a fight in a long time. Where it's like this one could be something crazy, where we something happens we don't expect, such as like Vicente Luque hurting Dos Anjos and getting a submission, or although there's that narrative of like Luque having bad brains or donkey brains. Rafael throws a head kick and like knocks him out, similar to like Justin Gaethje knocks out Dustin Poirier, even though Poirier had the hand up to block it. Like crazy stuff. So I'm very interested in what you guys think. So leave a comment below. Yeah, like, share, subscribe, join the Discord if you want to talk crap and make stupid jokes. But yeah, Johnny TigerBomb MMA, and I will catch you at the next fight.